Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time on this Wednesday, February the 12th. We're happy to have you in for another episode of the Primetime program. So, of all the options that are available to you, there are a couple of things that I think need to have reasonable expectations around them for Titans fans, for Titans media, and for the Titans themselves. Now, of course, I'm not going to have any information tonight for the Titans that they don't already know or haven't already been discussing. But tonight we're going to have a conversation about what you can expect to get back if and only if the Titans were to trade the number one overall pick. There have been 13 trades since 1967 of teams who had the number one overall selection in the draft and who traded out of that number one overall selection. It has happened 13 times since 1967. And there's a couple of different examples I think that are worth looking at for the Titans. And there are a couple that I think are unrealistic if you're a Titans fan based on any given draft year and how they compare to this specific draft as we get ready for the combine, for pro days, for 30 visits, and all the different things that still have yet to play out here in the next couple of months. I mean, frankly, in the next couple of weeks, we only have 2 weeks until we head up to Indianapolis. And of course, we're very excited about that for our combine coverage. Snow says we expect nothing back because we're taking Ward. Maybe you are, but that's not what tonight's about. Tonight's about the idea that if you were to trade out of the number one overall pick, because this is the time to do hypotheticals, what would that look like and what could you reasonably expect back? You may take Cam Ward, you may not take Cam Ward. You may pick number one, you may not pick number one. But in the 2 weeks that we have to talk about this until there's new information on the front of prospect evaluation, we have to consider all hypotheticals on the table, and they're very much open for business at the number one overall pick. Here's what I'll tell you off the top. Well, actually, let's get into this before I drop that bit of insight on you that I will at the start of the show. Before we start the show, we have to share the show around. You guys know how that works. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch, wherever you're spending your time with us this evening. We appreciate your participation in sharing this show. If you're hanging out on Facebook Live, you can share now to public. That's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. If you're hanging out on Twitter, please retweet the broadcast. If you're on YouTube or Twitch, like the video, hit that little thumbs up button, and we would be grateful for your participation that way. And maybe text the link to a friend if you're so inclined, because there's going to be a lot of Titans fans who are very interested in the Titans this offseason, what their plan will be, how they'll strategize, how they'll go about it. And trading the number one overall pick is very much in play at this point in time. Once you've shared the show around, more of you guys will trickle in here, and we'll go ahead and get started in the meantime. Welcome into A to Z Sports Prime Time from the Zen Sports Studios. I'm your host, Buck Rising. I'm proud, as always, to be presented to you by the wonderful people at Zen Sports. Promo code ATOZTN. Basketball, hockey, still ongoing. Bet all your favorite major sports with that promo code in the Zen Sports app. By the Bart Durham Injury Law Firm, bartdurham.com for more information, because you deserve to be paid. The process to do so starts at bartdurham.com. By Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer, online at Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet. The South's most trusted Ford dealer, as I mentioned, and at TrueMavFitness.com, where your first workout is free as a Middle Tennessee resident. No workout ever recycled, no workout ever repeated. Just the best programs in place to accomplish your fitness goals, and your first workout free at TrueMavFitness.com, as I mentioned. So, Snow, going back to this comment earlier, says, because the subject of tonight, if you're just now jumping in here, is what you can expect, what Titans fans can reasonably expect to get back if the Titans were to trade the number one overall pick. And the comment made earlier was, we expect nothing back because we're taking Ward. Here's what I know, okay? What I know is that you are not definitive about any of these players right now. You haven't even met Cam Ward. I'm talking about the Titans. They have had no visits with Cam Ward. Now, they can talk to people who have coached Cam Ward. They can talk to people who have played with Cam Ward. They can talk to his relatives. Quandre Diggs is a cousin, if I'm not mistaken, of Cam Ward. And whether Quandre Diggs is on the roster in 2025 for Tennessee or not, Brian Callahan can do some due diligence and be like, hey, what do I need to know about your cousin? What's the vibes? And of course, he's going to speak in glowing terms because that's family. But you can do some background research before you actually meet this kid because you haven't actually met this kid yet. So there's nothing definitive. And I understand what you're saying, and you're guessing. You're not saying definitively that the Titans would take Cam Ward, because if the Titans were taking Cam Ward, we'd all know about it by now. Like if there was no disputing in the year that Jared Goff came out, for example, the only discussion that was had around Jared Goff and Carson Wentz is which one of them would go number one. There was never any question as to players that would go above those two players coming out of the draft in 2016. It was always a conversation about the two of them at the top. That's not the case this year. The year that Joe Burrow came out in 2020, there was no disputing. Everybody in the world knew that Joe Burrow was going to be the number one overall pick by the Cincinnati Bengals. They knew it for months. It allowed us to move on to talk about picks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 15, whatever the case might be, because we all knew that the Bengals were going to take Joe Burrow first overall. Trevor Lawrence, even in that draft, there was no dispute for months. You could talk about Trevor Lawrence winning a collegiate national championship for the first time and everybody understanding that he was going to be the first overall pick whenever he came out. But even to push that further, there was no disputing that not only was Trevor Lawrence going to be taken first, but that Zach Wilson was definitively going to the Jets number 2 overall. We knew that for months. That was the reporting on it. There was no speculation to be had. Again, this year is not like those years. Now, that does not mean that Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or even Jackson Dart, because I really don't think there's that big of a difference between Shedeur and Jackson Dart as players. And I've heard some people smarter than me offer that opinion as well in terms of what they bring to the table. They play in different systems, of course, but as far as what they bring to the table, there's not a huge differentiation. I think there's a bigger gap between Ward and Shedeur than there is obviously between Shedeur and Jackson Dart. And I think you could probably debate which one of those players you might actually want over the other at that point in time. Again, it's based on system, fit, coaching staff. Geography is going to factor in a great deal to all three of these quarterbacks as to whether they succeed or whether they fail. But there's nothing definitive right now about the Tennessee Titans and the quarterbacks. The only thing that we know is that they're open for business, that they want to take calls, that they're keeping an open mind about all of this. And that's not the case if there's consensus around the quarterback prospects, as in fact is the conversation this year. So the question that we're going to ask you guys on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch is this: what do you expect to get back in return? If you're a Titans fan, and we're just going to go through this hypothetical as to you're trading the number 1 overall pick, what do you expect to get back if the Titans were to trade the number 1 overall pick? You give me what your expectation would be as far as the draft compensation that you would receive in return, and we'll talk about this together right after I remind you that your Two Rivers Ford take is made possible by the South's most trusted Ford dealer. That's Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet or online at tworiversford.com, where they have been serving Middle Tennesseans for over 40 years. Go to Two Rivers Ford to get the best pricing, the best financing, and the best on offer as far as quality American-made Ford vehicles, award-winning customer service. Two Rivers Ford in Mount Juliet or online at tworiversford.com for more information. So there's a lot of discussion to be had around the Titans and the number 1 overall draft pick. They could pick a player. I know Sam talked a little bit last night about Field Yates's latest mock draft. If you missed that conversation, Field Yates discussed that at length about why he chose Travis Hunter to go to the Tennessee Titans with the number 1 overall pick.
And let's start with Travis Hunter, the wide receiver or cornerback from could become an all-pro level wide receiver or all-pro level cornerback. Yes, we have never seen it at the NFL. We have not seen a player go both ways in a full-time capacity. Do I expect it? I'm not sure, but do I think Cleveland is up next? And as you know, Myles Garrett wants out. Whether he stays or whether he goes, Abdul Carter, to me, along with Travis Hunter, is in a tier of the top 2 players in this entire class. He had a wonderful season this past year, 12 sacks. He was at his best when it mattered the most. He was dominant during Penn State's run in the college football playoff. This guy has the best first step quickness in a very deep edge class this year. He had 12 sacks this past year. That seems like what he could be doing on a regular basis in the NFL. And finally, everybody's always wondering about quarterbacks. I have Cam Ward from Miami going first to the Giants, number 3 overall, the most dynamic quarterback in this year's draft class, led all quarterbacks in terms of passing touchdowns in the FBS last season. He's an innovator as well. He goes to the Giants, who, of course, desperately need a quarterback. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders lands with the Raiders. Of course, we know he already has a relationship with Tom Brady. A lot of respect there, but it goes way beyond that for the Raiders in making this selection. Shedeur Sanders, the best pocket passer in this year's draft class. Ball placement, accuracy, seeing the field and knowing where to throw the football to his receivers. That is what made Shedeur Sanders a prolific player for 4 seasons at both Colorado and Jackson State, the 2 stops during his college football career.
So that is Field Yates on ESPN discussing his mock draft. Now, in that situation, there's no trade. And the question that I'm going to ask you is this: what would you expect in return if the Titans were to trade out of the number 1 overall draft pick? Now, there's some information that you would need to have to be able to make that discernment. First, who are they trading with? How far back are they trading? And we'll talk later about how far you would be willing to trade back, depending on the offer. But let's play this hypothetical out with the thing that makes the most sense. All right, the hypothetical that is easiest to imagine that coming to fruition. That is the New York Giants. So it goes in terms of the first round right now: Tennessee 1, Cleveland 2, the New York Giants 3. We know a couple of things about the Giants. We know they need a quarterback. We know that their front office and their coaching staff are coming into this season under duress. John Mara, the owner of the New York Giants, many of you watched Hard Knocks and saw him talk about the Saquon Barkley thing, where they were not going to pursue Saquon Barkley. Obviously, that bit them in the ass in a huge way. Saquon, now a Super Bowl champion. The Giants, one of the worst teams in football in 2024. We know that the owner has expressed a thinning patience already with his coaching staff and his front office, despite them coming back. And we know they need a quarterback. So it's fair to expect that whether or not they value any of these quarterbacks high enough, that there is considerably more pressure on the Giants than any of the 3 teams at the top of the order to take a quarterback. The Titans are operating under the impression that they have patience, which means that they are not pressing to get a quarterback this year. Again, whether you want them to press to get a quarterback this year is a different conversation, but they are not going to press the issue, not force the issue around the quarterback situation if they don't feel that the quarterback situation is viable for them specific to the draft class. Cleveland could take a quarterback, or they could move Myles Garrett, they could draft Abdul Carter, and they could figure out something reasonable that would allow them to kind of bridge the gap between Deshaun Watson and the fact that he's going to be unavailable again with a second injury to his Achilles after the initial injury to his Achilles that's going to keep him off the field. They could choose to go the veteran quarterback route and build out the best possible roster and replenish their pass rush if they lose Myles Garrett with an Abdul Carter and a haul of picks. What are you doing, Bert? Okay, I guess a production issue on our end. Always nice to visit with Bert. But there's a couple of different ways that the Browns could go. The Browns could take a quarterback, or they could not. It's a coin flip as to what will happen with the second overall selection. But let's just entertain the idea of the Giants trading up to leapfrog the Browns right now. So in that situation, the Titans would swap from 1 to 3. And the thing that makes the most sense is 2 additional top 100 picks in next year's draft. So they would get the 3rd overall pick, and they would get their stated goal, whether it's a 2nd or a 3rd. Obviously, the value of that does matter. I don't expect them to get 2 first-round picks, a 2025 and a 2026 for this particular pick, because of the weakness of the quarterback draft class that dictates that they would not necessarily be able to cash in, for example, the way that the Chicago Bears did a couple of years ago. This is not the same caliber of draft class. This is not the same caliber of quarterback class, even if you don't like what the Bryce Young experience or the Caleb Williams experience has been to date. this is not going to yield the same kind of haul that the last trade for the number one overall pick in 2023 brought home, which was for the Bears. They traded the number one overall pick straight up to Carolina for wide receiver DJ Moore and 3 additional picks in the next 3 drafts. So Carolina got the number one overall pick and sent away DJ Moore, a number one wide receiver, their first round pick, which ended up being number 9, a second round pick in 2024, which ended up being 61, their first round pick in 2024, and the second round pick in 2025, simply to move up to number 1. There is no way that the Titans get that kind of a haul for this year's number 1 overall pick. Probably the best comparison that you would have is to go back to 2001, where the Chargers traded out of the number 1 overall pick, and they traded with the Atlanta Falcons. The Chargers traded wide receiver Tim Dwight, who was a really good special teams player, really good return man, the 2021 first-round pick. So they swapped picks, and the Chargers famously drafted LaDainian Tomlinson with that pick. There was a 2001 third-round pick included in that deal and a 2002 second-round pick included in that deal, simply for the number 1 overall pick, which the Falcons got and drafted Michael Vick. That's the best comparison that I think this particular number 1 overall pick would draw. That's the kind of trade that makes the most sense to me if you're trading with the New York Giants, because it's not as big a lift to go from 3 to 1, even though you're trying to leapfrog a team that you think may take a quarterback in Cleveland. Now, if you're talking about 6, dropping back from 1 to 6 with the Raiders, who are also in need of a quarterback solution and could be interested in trading up, then you're talking about a different level of compensation that I think, and we can talk about the Raiders scenario here in just a second, but I think if it's the Giants at 3, then you're swapping 1 and 3, and you're getting 2 future top 100 picks. I don't think you get a second first-round pick out of that deal. My expectation would be a 2026 second and potentially a 2025 third in that deal. Because the Titans desperately need a third-round pick. I don't think you do any deals that don't involve a third-round pick this year because of the L'Jarius Sneed trade and what that's cost you. And now the Chiefs get to pick 66th overall. Michael Snyder says, if I'm not trading, if it's that. Okay, well, you're not the Titans, but I understand your perspective. That's your opinion, that you don't find the commensurate value there. They may, because they have talked at great length about keeping an open mind, staying open for business, and most importantly, building through the trenches. That is something that Mike Borgonzi has continued to reiterate over and over again. They're not even playing the shell game of, oh, we really like these quarterbacks. And they can't, honestly, because they haven't met Cam Ward yet. They haven't had a meeting with Cam Ward yet. So the combine could change things, and that might further improve their opinion of Cam or Shador, or could further their opinion of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. There's nothing that's stopping them from taking either of those players number 1 overall. But that's kind of the value that you're looking at right now. And I think that's a lot less than Titans fans would expect to get back, because you look at 2023 and you say, oh, well, that was a great trade. Let's trade out of number 1. That's not this year's draft at all. This is a significantly lesser draft class specific to the quarterback position. And that's not my opinion. That's the opinion of the talent evaluators who are talking and watching and breaking down these players at this point in time. Combine, pro days, 30 visits could alter that thinking, but I don't think it's not going to alter the tape. And the opinion of the tape is that these 2 quarterbacks, and there are no such thing as finished products coming out of the college football game, but these 2 quarterbacks specifically are going to have to land in the right spots to succeed. And teams are more wary of that than they have been in previous years, let's say. So let's remind you guys that the Primetime Show is presented by the Ashton Real Estate Group of RE/MAX Advantage. Don't sell without the intel edge that only the official real estate agent of the Nashville Predators can provide to you. GaryAshton.com for more information. Don't sell without the intel. Let's ask you guys this question next. So, well, actually, let me not get ahead of myself, because I said I'd talk about the Raiders. So the Raiders are sitting at 6. In that scenario, I think that you could expect closer compensation to what the Bears got from the Panthers. I don't think you're going to match the strength of that deal, but I do think that you could start to talk about a player. And I do think that Max Crosby is an interesting name that's been brought up time in and time out. Max Crosby is a better player. Max Crosby would immediately be the best player on the Tennessee Titans if they acquired him as a part of the compensation package, if the Raiders were interested in coming up to one from currently their spot at 6th overall. I think you could still expect, obviously, the first round swap. You could still expect a third rounder and a future top 100 pick. And I do think that Max Crosby, who's an older player and in a contract situation where they could have, I mean, if they wanted to release Max Crosby, it would not cost them a significant amount of money. Right now, he's against their cap for north of $25 million this year. And I believe it's $24 million and change next year. But he's got 2 years left on his 4-year deal that he signed. Max Crosby immediately becomes the best player on the roster. He immediately gives you juice to a unit that desperately needs it. It's one of the worst pass rush groups in football last year, the Tennessee Titans, beyond just bad offensive line play and bad quarterback play. They couldn't get to the quarterback either. And having just watched the Super Bowl, we understand the critical nature of being able to affect the passing game and affect the quarterback specifically. So at that point, I would add Max Crosby into the compensation discussion. Whether or not you would have to give him a new contract on the backside of that or restructure his deal to provide him with additional guaranteed money, that would remain to be seen, and potentially those conversations could impact the value of the trade. But I think trading back to 6 is not offensive to me if Max Crosby is a part of the conversation. I would not have a conversation with the Raiders that did not involve Max Crosby if I was the Titans. But that's kind of what it looks like to me at this point in time. William Jones says, God damn, this man Buck can grow a beard faster than anyone I know. I talked about this the other day, baby. I'm Egyptian. This is what we do. Great skin complexion. And certainly a healthy head of hair, a healthy face full of hair, and certainly plenty of chest hair as well. It's just good genes. What can you do? All right. So with all of that said, let's talk about how far back you would be willing to trade. If I'm talking about 6 with the Raiders, and you have the number 1 overall pick, how far back are you willing to trade at this point in time? We'll talk about that together right after I remind you that the Primetime program is made possible by Bart Durham Injury Law. The Bart Durham firm is there to help you because you deserve to be paid. And Blair Durham and his team will help you as best they can, as they have done for Tennesseans and Kentuckians for over 75 years, getting you the results that you deserve, respective to automobile accidents, big truck accidents, or motorcycle accidents. They also have many other areas of practice specific to automobile incidents or personal injury law. Go to bartdurham.com for more information. Get your free consultation today and learn how you can be paid, how you can get paid because you deserve to be paid. More information at bartdurham.com. So the question now becomes, how far back are you willing to trade? If 3 is the Giants and 6 is the Raiders, how far back are you willing to go? Iro or Ario, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it, says the Titans are letting the media trick them into not getting one of the 2 quarterbacks. Don't fall for it. Oh, well, listen. One, I don't think that's true. I don't think the Titans are letting the media influence them. Well, no, that's not true. I know the Titans have let media influence them in the past. And I think they regret that, certainly. I think that they are certainly keenly aware of the criticisms of them right now. They're very sensitive about the criticisms about them right now. And that's fair. They think they're putting together something meaningful. The rest of the league thinks that they're a joke. That would bring about some hypersensitivity. And, there's nothing to indicate that they should be considered anything but what they have been, which is the worst team in the league and certainly one of the worst teams in the league for the past 3 seasons. If the Titans, let's just entertain this discussion. If the Titans were letting media analysis or analysis in the media influence their football decisions, then you've hired the wrong people. then those people should be fired immediately. If those people are not capable of coming up with their own plan, their own process, and listen, for what it's worth, I think these people are capable of doing that. Whether it works or not remains to be seen. But I don't discredit the amount of football acumen that they have since brought into this building as they've not restructured, but fine-tuned the structure of what their front office is going to look like. If you've hired a bunch of people that read Twitter too much and are going to let that impact their decision-making, those people shouldn't have these jobs. And you're banged no matter what you do. For what it's worth, I do not think that that is the case with this current administration. I think that the business people around the Titans and the optics around the Titans, the people who are in charge of that, are very sensitive about the way that the Titans are being discussed right now. But beyond that, I think you're in a decent position as far as who you've hired to brought in. Jeremy Dowdy says, care to elaborate on how media influenced them prior? Well, what I mean by that is that they have read too much of their own press. Not necessarily that the media has influenced their decision-making, but they have been reactive, more reactive than you should be to some of the decisions. Now, whether that makes it out into the public sphere, I'm just saying, like, I'll just use my own personal experience. I've said a lot of nasty things about them in the last, 6 months because they've been wretched. They've been a waste of time. Nothing that I wouldn't be comfortable saying again. And I have gotten many calls specific to my opinions and asking me why I feel this way. And, what basis do you have to talk about the Titans this way? And again, I'll keep those conversations, who I've had those conversations with, private, but I've gotten plenty of butthurt calls and texts essentially from people who work for that team because I've been really, really hard on them. So when I say, I shouldn't say influence necessarily, because I don't think it's impacted their decision-making too much, but I do think that they've read too much of their own press here in the last couple of years, and that can negatively influence you from time to time, certainly. And it's impossible to ignore all of this or to avoid all of this stuff, but I do think that it can start to make you concerned about things that don't matter. I think John Robinson was overwhelmingly concerned with things that didn't matter towards the end of his tenure, and I think it impacted his decision-making. These are things that you try to avoid. You try to keep the main thing, and the main thing is the roster construction of the football team or the coaching of the on-field product of the football team and not what some asshole is saying about you in the media. Josh says, if the media made the narrative that Sanders or Ward was a generational talent, then the deals would be sweeter. Yeah, but why would we do that? We don't care. I mean, what's that? It doesn't benefit us at all. If that was something that we were hearing reliably and that you could talk about it, but I'm not just going to gaslight you for the sake of gaslighting you. I don't think most media people would do that way. And certainly that's not been the case. For the most part, I think that people in sports media, and I can't speak to political media or general news media or any of that, but I think for the most part, most people in sports media are just there to tell you as much information as they can. And some people get ahead of themselves with the opinion part of that versus the actual news part of that and what's relevant to fans versus what's polarizing to fans. But yeah, media, to your point, could it help? Yes, it could, but that's not something that's going to happen because that's not something that anybody credible is saying at this point in time. With all that to say, how far would you be willing to trade back? I wouldn't go back further than 6 with the Raiders. I think that this team has too many needs. Need a pass rusher, need an offensive tackle, need an offensive guard, need a quarterback, need a safety, need a wide receiver. You don't want to put yourself in a position to where you're just, all right, trade back for the sake of trading back. That's not a viable way to approach these things. What is viable is staying within the realm of the top 10, preferably the top 6, and still being able to get a player that's going to make an immediate impact, whether it be that offensive lineman, that wide receiver. Who's to say that listen, guys, we have no idea where these quarterbacks are going to get drafted. The thing that we know about this is that there's no consensus about taking either of them number 1. That's the only thing that we know definitively. If there was consensus, like I said, we would know by now, even though I know it's early in the process. Once we get through the combine, maybe that'll become a little more clear, and maybe there will be less conversation or less disputing. All right, Cam Ward's probably going to be the number one overall pick here relative to the rest of the class. Or perhaps this could be a conversation where we're talking about, for example, let's just take Will Levis as an example. It's easy to think about this now and say that you weren't surprised that Will Levis wasn't a first-round pick. But the vast majority of people here in Nashville, around the league, coaching, scouting, fan, or otherwise, most people were surprised that Will Levis fell out of the first round of the draft. And Will Levis was a Minnesota Vikings, Tennessee Titans trade away from being a first-round draft pick, but ultimately that didn't happen. They had to trade with the Cardinals to get to the top of the second round, and then they ultimately took Will Levis. But Will Levis was a projected first-round pick for the vast majority of the draft cycle until he wasn't. Hell, Malik Willis was talked about for stints in time as a first-round draft pick, and then he wasn't. Kenny Pickett was the only first-round draft pick that year, and then the two quarterbacks later, Ritter and then Willis, went in the third round. There's nothing that indicates right now that Cam Ward, that anybody but Cam Ward in the quarterback class this year is expected to go in the first round. I think most people expect Shedeur to go in the first round, but I don't think that's any kind of a lock at this point in time. There was nothing to indicate that Bo Nix or Michael Penix would be first-round picks last year. Maybe more indication that Penix would be, but certainly not 8th overall to the Falcons. Nobody had that on their board. Most people, everybody but the Broncos apparently, was surprised about the idea of Bo Nix being taken 12th. So there's so many different possibilities that can play themselves out. All I'm saying is, first and foremost, you don't have to draft a quarterback number one overall to get a franchise quarterback. Mahomes was not a first overall pick. Josh Allen was not a first overall pick. Lamar Jackson was not a first overall pick. Joe Burrow is the only one that I can think of that's had any reasonable success as a number one overall draft pick. Also, drafting a quarterback number one overall does not mean that quarterback will succeed, because the hit rate on these guys is about 50% if you went through. And really, if you took it further and said, if you looked at the teams that drafted these players, like Baker Mayfield was not a hit for the Browns, but Baker Mayfield has obviously gone on to be a successful NFL quarterback. But for the Browns, it was a failed proposition. They took him number one overall, and then they moved on from him after his rookie contract. That's a miss. That's a miss for the Browns. Baker Mayfield is a hit as a player, but not for the Cleveland Browns, who drafted him number one overall. So Kyler Murray is a similar discussion. Is Kyler Murray a success as a number one overall draft pick with the Arizona Cardinals? These things can be debated, certainly, but ultimately Kyler Murray has only appeared in one postseason game to date. Trevor Lawrence has obviously underwhelmed as a number one overall draft pick. He has also been in the playoffs, and he's also won the division once, but I don't think anybody would say that Trevor Lawrence has lived up to a success, what you would define as a success for the Jacksonville Jaguars organization with the number one overall pick. These things are very, very difficult to hit on. So keep an open mind. Don't marry yourself to the idea of a quarterback number one. Don't think just because if you don't draft a quarterback number one, that you wouldn't still draft a quarterback, because these quarterbacks are very much up to debate, or up for debate, as to where they might actually be, where they might actually rank in terms of every other player at every other position. If Cam Ward is the 10th best prospect or 15th best prospect or 20th best prospect in the first round, you don't take that player number one overall. You take the best player on your board. That's what the Titans or whomever would draft number one overall are responsible for doing. You take the best player in the draft if you're going to stick and pick at the number one overall pick. And right now, there's very few people who are offering the opinion that Cam Ward is the best player, or Shedeur Sanders is the best player in this particular draft class. Speaking of draft analysis, we announced the live show, the Greg Cosell Install live show that we are bringing back for a third straight season, where we're going to meet with you guys. We're going to pack it out again. We've pitched 2 sellouts in the past 2 years, and we're going to up the ante this year. It's going to be an awesome event. Greg is flying in the Friday after the draft. That's May the 2nd. We're going to host it at the same venue that we've done in the last couple of years. Last year, Rand Carthon was obviously there with us, breaking down the draft picks and free agency a week removed from putting together that draft class. We're working with the Titans right now as far as other special announcements to go, because obviously Rand Carthon no longer with the organization. But we really appreciated Rand's insights. It was a really unique experience for Titans fans, and this event sold out so fast. Bert is going to drop the link in the live stream chat for you guys, and I'm going to play you a clip from not last year's event, but 2 years ago, the first time we did this, with Greg Cosell of NFL Films breaking down the Titans 2023 draft class.
So he played under center, the play action game, and another thing to keep in mind, when you turn your back to the defense, that's also a learned trait. You know, a lot of college quarterbacks, they're in the shotgun on every single snap. They never turn their back to the defense. So when you turn your back to the defense, you have to remember one thing. The defense is not going to be in the same place that it was before you turned your back. So, you know, that becomes a learned trait. It's a little scary for a quarterback that's never done it before. Will Levis has done that. And a lot of the concepts, pass game concepts that I saw when I watched the University of Kentucky, you see those same concepts in the NFL. So he's familiar with those concepts, how to read those concepts versus defense. These are things he's familiar with. Now, again, that doesn't mean that if he were to get an opportunity to play early, that doesn't mean he's going to go out there and go 30 for 40 for 400 yards.
Right.
But it just means that he's aware of this. You're not starting from scratch. He has an understanding of the reading progressions with these specific concepts against specific coverages.
So that is a clip from 2 years ago when the Titans drafted Will Levis. Now, obviously, things changed. Things have changed significantly since then. Mike Vrabel was the head coach at the time. Now Brian Callahan is in charge of these things. And the Titans will again be selecting, or at least making a change in the quarterback room, whether it's Derek Carr, Sam Darnold, Shedeur Sanders, or otherwise. There are a lot of different things that we are going to be able to break down, and we're going to be able to enjoy. Ryan Ward says, not a good clip to show. He didn't look like he had a clue what happened. That's not true at all, because again, that's from 2023. And Will Levis in his first game went out there and kicked ass and was a better player in 2023. He was more comfortable with what he was being asked to do under Tim Kelly than he was under Brian Callahan. Now, obviously, we changed that analysis, or we adapted that analysis with a sample size of Will Levis into last year's show. And that was something that we talked to Rand Carthon about with Greg on the stage. And we can provide you more context of that. But Greg nailed it spot on. That's a player who came in from a pro-style system who didn't have as big of a learning curve as, for example, Malik Willis did in that particular situation. But he put together a promising rookie season. Nobody came away from Will Levis's rookie season being like, that guy doesn't belong at the NFL level. It was only till last year when the bottom fell out and he had the nuclear moments where Titans fans declared themselves out on Will Levis, and the Titans ultimately declared themselves out on Will Levis's. But the analysis, Greg's analysis is as good, if not better, than anybody breaking down NFL tape that doesn't work for a team. He's an incredible resource. We're lucky to have him. It's a 3-hour live show. He takes your questions as a part of that. And as always, we'll have some special guests along the way as well. We're going to wait till the Combine to announce the special guests that we will have in attendance for this live show, but we're going to offer you the opportunity to get in today before it sells out for a third straight year. The tickets can be purchased for as low as $30, and Bert has put in the link to the live stream chat for you guys to look at those options, whether they be the VIP package or just the general admission, and we look forward to seeing you guys there on May the 2nd. All right, with everything that we've got going on right now, we need to do a little rising and falling. Whose stock rose, whose stock fell this week in sports? In the comments section, you guys can give your examples. I'll give you mine here in just a moment, right after I remind you that the Primetime program is made possible by the wonderful people, the wonderful folks at Zen Sports. Promo code ATOZTN gets you in on all the action. Zen Sports has all manner of great offers for you, including an offer like this that allows you to boost insurance bets. Every day, Zen Sports puts out a selection of 2-leg parlays. If you wager $25 or more on one of those bets, you get $10 back if only one leg loses. The bets go up around 10 a.m. every day, and you can get in on all the action. Terms and conditions do apply. Gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789 for more information. Zen Sports must be 21 plus and in the state of Tennessee to bet. Zen Sports, where betting just gets better. Okay, whose stock rose, whose stock fell this week in sports? The player whose stock fell the most is Patrick Mahomes, but not even the most stock fallen was Mahomes in his family this week, because Patrick Mahomes Sr., man, I don't know. His family, Patrick Mahomes' family, is just so thoroughly unlikable, from the brother to the wife to the dad who has the DUI issues. And then there's this video that went viral of him in the streets of New Orleans trying to fight former MLB player who, of course, they had issues with during Pat Sr.'s playing career, John Rocker. Just a terrible look.
Oh shit. Oh shit.
Bad look all around, and now the two of them are going to fight in Barstool's Rough and Rowdy, which is even a worse look for the father of three-time Super Bowl champion Patrick Mahomes. Somebody said, I heard that was staged for a quote-unquote professional fight event between them. Possibly, but I don't know, man. The Mahomes family situation is fascinating because, like, Pat does not do anything wrong publicly, at the very least. And to have as many different, let's say, controversial people around him and his family, be it his wife, his younger brother, his father. I know his mom got into political discourse this past offseason with her support for now President Trump. But it's just a lot of polarizing figures around, the economy that is Patrick Mahomes Jr. And, it's very rare that the family does justice to the person who's keeping all of them relevant, which is, of course, Patrick Mahomes Jr. at this point in time. Stock down, Patrick Mahomes Sr. Also, stock up, John Rocker. John Rocker looks yoked. And I don't know, I know he comes from a different era of baseball where a lot of different things have been alleged about a lot of different players of that time. And whether or not John Rocker is continuing on that path, I know his social media behavior would indicate some level of roid rage, reckless speculation. But John Rocker looks better than Patrick Mahomes Sr. does in that fight, or in that, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Kerfuffle.
Conflict, we'll call it, in that conversational conflict at that point in time. And we'll see what happens in the Rough and Rowdy fight. I guess, if you can't watch a Jake Paul, another Jake Paul fight, you can watch that kind of garbage. Not for me, but doesn't mean that people won't be a part of it or be entertained by it. Certainly there's entertainment value there. All right, that's going to do it for us tonight on the Primetime program. Thank you guys, as always, for hanging out. Radio tomorrow from 10 to 1. John Ledyard will join us. We'll get his draft analysis on what he thinks of this draft class. Nobody offers more honest opinions on draft prospects than John Ledyard, who was a critical part of founding the Draft Network and has continued to do his scouting for his Substack in the past couple of years. Looking forward to talking to John. I think there's going to be some brutal honesty there. I don't know if Titans fans are going to like it or hate it, but you can look forward to John on the radio show tomorrow. We'll look forward to having you guys from 10 to 1 on 104.5 The Zone. We'll see you there.
Go home! Go home!